really considered the fact that my dad was a musician to be particularly special, even though some of my friends tried to convince me otherwise. Their dads were plumbers, bankers, and salesmen, and my dad played guitar and sang. To me, there was nothing different about any of them. In hindsight, I probably should have realized it on the day a few years earlier when he called all of us into the living room, saying he wanted to show us something. Mom and Julie took a seat on the couch with Dad, and I sat on the floor. Dad told me to turn on the TV. I got up because, as a high-energy 3-year-old, I was basically the family's remote control back then. The television warmed up, and as the picture emerged from within that dark screen, there was Dad on the TV singing a song. I was excited and confused. How could Dad be sitting there on the couch and at the same time be singing on TV? I kept asking how that was possible. Mom and Dad gave up on convincing me to settle down and watch and listen, so they just laughed at my bewilderment. Julie, who was 18 months younger than me, didn't say anything. She just took turns staring at the TV and then Dad. But the incident still didn't change my image of Dad. If he had been on TV regularly, that would have been something special. I watched a lot of TV, and I thought actors were really, really cool. But my dad, he was Dad. I didn't look at him as being anything else, especially famous. The first indication that I might be missing something regarding my dad's status came that day in second grade. We had been separated by divorce for a few years, with us kids living with Mom in Texas. When she got pregnant by a married man she had been seeing, my brother, my sister, and I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona for a while to live with Dad, his second wife, and their adopted daughter. On my first day in my new school, the teacher introduced me to the class and asked me what my dad did for a living. "He's a singing star," I answered. My new classmates laughed. "No," the teacher interrupted. "He's not kidding." Then she pulled out one of Dad's records. She was a fan. The other kids stopped laughing. That was when I began to think that perhaps my dad was a little cooler than most. I was a teenager when I saw firsthand just how big a deal my dad truly was. Traveling with him as one of his crew members, I really got to witness how people would go gaga over him, particularly women. I loved my dad, and even though he was absent for big pieces of my young childhood, I never possessed any ill will toward him. Joining him on the road brought us closer together, and we made up for missed time for the next 30 years until he passed away. Dad, boss, best friend. He was all those to me, and now, 14 years after his passing, I still revel every day in the fact that I am Waylon Jennings' oldest son. I had a backstage pass to the life of the best outlaw ever, and I can tell you that he wasn't what he was often made out to be. Dad was a trusting soul, but he possessed a bad habit of trusting people he shouldn't have, and as a result, he made just about every mistake possible during his career. I'll admit he could be an ornery cuss at times. He received criticism for his quick exits after shows, but he had to scoot. Fans would get fanatical over my dad, and he hired people, members of the Hells Angels no less, to make sure the more determined ones couldn't get to him. He didn't like granting interviews to the press and DJs either. Too many times he had woken up to an article in the morning paper that said the exact opposite of what he had told the reporter. As for country music DJs, back then they tended to drink a lot. Few people knew how much Dad disliked being around alcohol and drunks, even if they were the DJs who determined which albums hit the airwaves. Somehow, somewhere along the way, the label outlaw unfortunately became associated with him more as a person than as a musician. It's true that Dad was not always the loyal husband he has been portrayed to be. When he was married, he had girlfriends. When he divorced, he had another woman, or two, or three, whom my sister, my brother, and I referred to as his wife-in-waiting. That was another reason he darted for the doors after a show. He had people waiting on him. And by people, I mean women. Dad kept 3